Hi, good evening. I'm Nisha Patel, Public Works Director and City Engineer for the City of Seaside. And tonight we'll be providing a presentation on the Seaside Municipal Water System and an update on its water supply. I'm here tonight with water experts in the area, Andrew Sturbins from Schaff and Wheeler and Rick Riedel from the Wallace Group. And I'm going to now hand it over to Andrew to start the presentation.
Thank you. Excuse me. So good evening. Our format for this evening, we've got a brief presentation that takes 10 to 15 minutes to discuss the water system and the proposed water well. We're going to go through the presentation first, then we will open up the lines for questions. Everyone who wants to speak will have a minute to either ask a question or make a comment. You also, at the bottom of your screen, have a Q&A button, and you can type a question in there, and those questions will come up at the end. After everyone's had a chance to speak, we'll go through the questions received and try to answer as many as we can during the hour. Again, I'm Andy Sturbins. I'm with Schaff and Wheeler Engineers. I've been doing water supply planning in this area for about 15 years, this part of the state for about 15 years, and about 25 years in the water engineering business. So I'm just going to proceed with the slides. If I can get it to move. All right, so just a brief background on the system. There are 3 water suppliers in the city. We have the Seaside Municipal Water System that serves the central portion of the city, the east central portion of the city, more or less from LaSalle Ave down to Hilby and from Yosemite to the old Fort Ord border. You've got Cal-Am, which serves California American, which serves the rest of the city outside the former Fort Ord. And then within the former Fort Ord, the Marina Coast Water District serves that portion of the city. All of the city's water comes from groundwater wells. The city system and Cal-Am take water from the Seaside groundwater basin, and Marina Coast Water District takes it from the Monterey subbasin of the Salinas groundwater basin. 2 subbasins are adjacent but not connected. There's a high spot in the middle. Water flows in 2 directions. Here's a map to better show the city. You've got the green area here is the portion of the city we're talking about, the municipal water system. All of the pink areas are served by Cal-Am. The bluish area is served by Marina Coast Water District. This portion of the city doesn't have any development on it right now. And in fact, this dirt road here defines the edge of the Fort Ord National Monument. These yellow lines here define the north and south boundaries of the Seaside groundwater basin. So our water supply comes from this portion of the land right here. Okay, a little bit about the system reliability. The water we get from the Seaside subbasin meets all state and federal drinking water requirements. It's a good source of water supply, but it's limited. The Seaside groundwater basin has a water master. The water master manages withdrawals by the various well owners to make sure that everyone only takes their fair share of the water, and nobody overpumps the aquifer, which leads to deplenishing the resource. All right, the water system, the city water system, has only 1 active water well. All right, we used to have multiple drinking water wells, but as wells get older, they fall out of service. Our last remaining well was drilled in 2001. Okay, water systems need to have multiple sources of supply. You want to have more than 1 water well if you're relying on groundwater, more than 1 pump if you're relying on surface water. And you want to be able to meet your maximum day demand with the largest well or the largest pump out of service. That way no one is forced to curtail their water use just because you had a mechanical issue. Okay, people have been asking about what are other water supply options. So number 1, we can just put another well into the Seaside subbasin and take the water we're entitled to. We can connect to an adjacent system with available capacity. So Cal-Am has wells in the same aquifer, but they use them to meet their customer demands. We have a mutual assistance or mutual aid agreement with CalAm, so they can provide us water during an emergency. We should provide them water if they have a mechanical emergency. But they can't provide it to us on a long-term basis. Similarly, MCWD has multiple wells. Their wells are in the Salinas groundwater basin, the Monterey sub area of the Salinas groundwater basin. They can provide emergency backup supply to us, but they can't provide a permanent source of supply because of the way the two groundwater basins are managed. We could develop an entirely new source of supply. We could desalinate the Pacific Ocean, but that is so much more expensive than just drilling another well in the Seaside aquifer. It's off the table. So other things we have to think about when we're looking at water supply, we would need to look at cost to customers. All right, it costs more water to buy well water from CalAm than it does to operate our own system. The municipal water system rates are based on just pumping our own wells. So we charge customers $10.60 for 100 cubic foot. CalAm's rates are based on operating a much larger system with multiple projects, water supply projects behind that. Their minimum rate is $17.65 per 100 cubic foot. Obviously, if the city is buying water at $17 and selling it at $10, they lose money on every gallon they buy. So we don't want to do that as a long-term solution. All right. How big a well are we looking for? We want to have at least 600 gallons per minute of well production capacity. That'll meet our maximum day demand. If we can get a well that runs at a higher production rate, that's better. It allows us to refill the water tanks quicker. It allows us to supply our neighbor during their emergency without worrying about not meeting our own demands. Everyone's on the call because we want to know, does this well need to be in our neighborhood? So here are the must-haves and the wanna-haves for locating a drinking water well. First, it's got to be in the Seaside sub-basin, and we saw that map. It covers most of town. It needs to be at least 1,000 feet from the nearest production well. All right, because when you have two water wells both pumping at the same time, if they're too close to each other, they start competing for the same drop of water in the aquifer. We need to be at least 700 feet from the nearest pure water Monterey injection well, because under that program, the purified water has to remain in the ground for a certain amount of time before it can be pumped out at a supply well. We need to be at least 50 feet from a sanitary or storm sewer or other non-potable fluid pipeline, because it's a state law and because a water well is a pipe that goes from the surface down into the water-bearing strata below, and pipes run both ways. We pump water up the pipe, but contaminated fluids could find their way to the wellhead and migrate down the pipe. So we want to make sure we're far enough away horizontally that no bad fluids find their way to the well casing and start migrating down. We need to be on city-owned property or on a site that the city can reasonably acquire an easement or purchase. And then the things we would like to have, we want it to be in the Santa Margarita strata, which is the deeper, more productive part of the aquifer. And I've got a figure that'll show you that. We want to be north of the Ord Terrace Fault, which puts us into the deeper portion of the aquifer. And I've got a figure that'll show you that. And we want to be close to our municipal service area, because the further away we go, the more horizontal pipe we have to build to connect the well to our distribution system. So when we talk about groundwater layers, this, as you work your way down from the surface, you've got the sands that we see every day, the dune sands. Those extend down a few hundred feet. Then around sea level, there's a layer of clay and a new layer of sand, which is referred to as the Paso Robles aquifer. About 300, 400 feet below that, there's another layer of clay, and below that is the Santa Margarita aquifer, which is a different density of sand. It holds more water and it's more productive if you can put a well into it. And underneath that is the Monterey Formation, which is a shale, and that basically gives us a hard bottom on the aquifer. So when we talk about the difference between the Santa Margarita and the Paso Robles, just understand that the Santa Margarita is the aquifer on the bottom. When we say we want to be north of the Ord Terrace Fault, this dashed line on the map shows you where the Ord Terrace Fault is located. So basically the northeast corner of Seaside and up into Fort Ord on the golf course is north of the fault, and everything from, San Pablo Ave south is south of the fault. And why do we want to be north of the fault? Well, here's a figure that shows you what happens. A fault is just a location where sometime in history, 2 layers of soil displaced relative to each other. And along this particular fault, the deeper Santa Margarita Formation shifted about 500 feet vertically. It may have shifted vertically, or it may have shifted horizontally over, millennia. But the upshot is you can drill a well about 1,000 feet deep on the north side of the fault, or you can drill a well about 500 feet on the south side of the fault. And the deeper the well, the more water you have above it that you can draw from. So that's why we want to be on the north side. So we say we want to be 1,000 feet from all these production wells. Well, all of these blue circles show you where there are existing municipal water production wells. All right. And you can see that most of these wells are already in residential neighborhoods. Most of these wells are owned by CalAm. The one owned by Seaside is here. The city had an older well down here next to MLK School, just on here for reference. These red dots up here are Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project wells. All right, that's a joint CalAm Peninsula Water Management District project where they take excess flows from the Carmel River in the wintertime. They purify the water, put it into their distribution system, inject that water into the aquifer using these wells to store it. And then in the summer months, they turn the pumps on and take the water back out of the aquifer and provide it to customers. These green dots over here, these are Pure Water Monterey injection wells. Similar project. What they do is at the Monterey One Water plant in North Marina, they take a variety of source flows, stormwater, wastewater, ag processing water that they use to wash vegetables. They purify that water through a process that makes it actually purer than the groundwater we take out of the ground originally. Put that purified water into the aquifer through injection wells, and then after that water's been in the ground for 6 months or more, we're allowed to take that water back out through any municipal well. That project, because it's joint Peninsula Water Management District and Pure Water or Monterey One Water and CalAm. CalAm is the one extracting that water through their Ord Grove, Peralta, and ASR wells. So anyway, these are the areas where we don't want to interfere with these other existing wells when we site a new well. All right, so how big a spot are we looking for? The well needs to have a 50-foot control radius with none of those non-potable water pipelines or other conflicting land uses above it. We need to have a pump house to protect the electrical equipment, muffle the sound. And we want to be on a fenced yard so that we always have reserved space to bring in a pump servicing rig or a delivery truck. So the yard may be as small as 50 by 50. It may be as large as 100 by 100. It kind of depends on where the site is that we finally end up putting the well. So possible locations within town, and I'll show you this on a map in a minute, but when you're looking at sites which are of this size that the city already owns, our options are Havana Solis Park, Lincoln Cunningham Park, possibly the north edge of Ord Terrace School. We would need to get an easement, or the former Fort Ord up by the golf course, or the east side of Seaside along the BLM boundary. And if we just look at the map, we've shaded all the areas that we either don't want to be because of the distance from an existing well, or because it's on the south side of the fault and the aquifer is not as deep. You can see the sites we've got available then are just a couple of city parks, the edge of the school here, open space up here near the golf course, or open space over here, undeveloped land east of General Jim Moore Boulevard. And so those are the sites that we're looking at right now. Okay, things now that we've got more things we have to look at besides just whether there's groundwater available. We need to look at what would it cost to develop the site. Is there electrical power available at the site? What would the construction impacts be? There's going to be a CEQA process. You know, some sites may be ideal in some fashion, but less than ideal in others. But we'll go through all of these things and then make a recommendation to City Council, and after that, proceed with a CEQA process to evaluate the one or two sites that are most favorable. All right, so we've received quite a few questions in advance. So we'll just go ahead and answer the most common ones here, and then we'll open it up for public questions. All right, can the new well be located where the last one was located? And the answer there is yes, possibly. All right, what the current well 4 is located right next to former well 3. All right, we can't, if we have two wells right next to each other, we can't run them at the same time, but we could run one or the other on alternate days. So yes, we could go next to well 4, which is over on Juarez Street. Does it have to be located in a city park? Not necessarily, but needs to be on a piece of property that the city owns, and city parks are owned by the city, so that's why they ended up on the list. Okay, can we buy water from Cal-Am rather than drilling a new well? No, not as a long-term solution. Cal-Am needs their well capacity to meet their own customer demands. You can see with the Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project and the Pure Water Monterey Project, they're storing more water in the Seaside groundwater basin than they were a decade ago. So they need more production wells or more well production capacity to deliver that stored water to their customers in the peak summer months. So they can provide us emergency supply, but they, you know, connecting to Cal-Am on a long-term basis, they would probably need to add the well that we're looking at adding. Okay, how long does a well last? Wells can last from 40 to 80 years long, depending on the site conditions. Well 3 lasted almost 50 years before it went out of service. So that's why you don't normally see well construction in your neighborhood, is because if they drilled the well the year before they built your house, you might move out of town before they come and need to drill the replacement well. Okay. Some components at the well site, the motor, the controller, those will require periodic upgrades and repairs, but that's not a significant life event. That's a service truck pulling up, doing one day's worth of work, and then driving away. How long does it take to construct a well? It takes about, 4 to 8 weeks, depending on conditions, to drill and test a deep well. All right, that's about what it took when they drilled the Pure Water Monterey wells, which are about 1,000 feet deep. Outfitting the well, which is installing the pump, adding the yard piping, adding the electrical controls, that can take 6 to 9 months of on-site construction, and that's usually not immediately after the well is drilled. The well would be drilled, it will sit idle while the rest of the equipment is purchased and the contractor mobilizes, and then someone will be on site for 6 months of construction before the well actually goes into service. All right, what impact would drilling have on nearby residents? Which was an excellent question. So we don't expect, the drilling operation itself doesn't cause ground vibrations. That was the original question. But there will be noise because the drill rig is a diesel engine. There will be traffic impacts because there will be trucks, coming and going from the site. Portions of the work, when they get to reaming and installing the casing, that's a 24-hour operation. When they get to doing the long-term pumping test on a well. That's a long-term operation. That may be 24-hour operations where the diesel engine and the work lights continue overnight, but that's a 1 or 2 days event. That's not weeks on end. And another excellent question came in: can the state help finance this well? The city does, or the state does have the Clean Water revolving fund, which is a low interest loan program. The city's looking at applying for that loan. There are also various grants for water supply, and the city is looking into those possibilities, but it's a little bit early to see what the applications haven't gone out yet, and it's too early to tell what the state will actually lend the city. All right, that is the end of the slides. So now I will turn it over to the city clerk, who will allow folks to answer questions or ask questions.
Thank you, Andy. I have a few questions that have come through the question and answer, so I'll ask the first one on their behalf. Question and concern. On Juarez Street was released with water flooding our street with adverse effects. City did not give warning. What is occurring there?
I'll turn that one over to Nisha if she has an idea of how to answer it.
Yeah, I was not aware that the city was releasing water, so I can get back to the resident who asked this question, but I don't have the answer right now.
Thank you. Follow-up and questions can be sent to pwinfo@ci.seaside.ca.us. The next question is, will these other non-park sites, for example, golf course site, Seaside site, definitely be included in the feasibility study?
I believe they are. Nisha, can you confirm that one?
Yes, we're looking at other sites.
Okay, the next question. 24 to 48 hours of continuous light/noise would be quite a disturbance/impact to residents adjoining the parks. How would this be mitigated?
That's a good question. So when you construct a well, you put up sound barriers, which are basically tall fabric walls to muffle the sound. That would go up that would be a required mitigation for any work going on adjacent to residences. As far as the 24 to 48 hours of, the days when they have to do night work, we would provide notices to neighborhood residents in advance, so they would know about it. There would be, again, the sound and light barrier would be up. As far as well testing, if it doesn't need to extend for a full 24 hours, they would schedule it to occur during daylight hours. But those are all things that would have to be worked out after the site was selected and a viable well was drilled.
Will community input on siting?
Well, we're receiving community input tonight, and certainly when this goes to City Council for them to approve the site and construction of a test well, there'll be a community input opportunity at that point. Between now and then, there should also be, before a permanent well is drilled, there should be at least a CEQA initial study, and that would be an opportunity for public comment and both on the siting and on any required mitigations.
The next question is from Donna. Can the well at the MLK Middle School be revived?
I don't think anyone on the call was here when that well was active. If you Rick, do you remember?
Yeah, that well has been inactive for at least 15 years. It was the first well that the city installed, and I think it's in a very shallow part of the aquifer. So if a new well was installed there, it wouldn't be as efficient as the sites we're looking at now. It's on the wrong side of the fault, as the figure showed.
Yeah, as I recall, that one was like 300 feet deep, and it was producing. This is just from reading the well record. It looked like it was producing maybe 250 gallons per minute. So if the city were to install a new well, in an opposite corner of that park, and then take the original well facility out so that the net loss of parkland was zero, they would still need to drill a second well somewhere south of the fault in order to achieve the target production rate. So again, you have to be able to operate your system with the most productive well out of service. So if the next well you drill is not as productive as well 4, you're going to end up needing to drill 2 wells.
Next question is from Moni Law. Would the drilling, pumping, etc. also impact nearby residents' water, the quality and/or quantity?
The well drilling would not, because when you're drilling the well, you're not connected to the distribution system. You're drilling the well into the water-bearing strata, the aquifer. And then once you've outfitted the well and placed it into service, the residents closer to that well would be receiving, groundwater from the new well, not instead of the old well, just because that's the well which would be filling the pipe. But since the source water is coming from the same aquifer, and we don't treat the water we chlorinate the water, because the state says put some chlorine in the water to make sure nothing can get into nothing can grow in the distribution system, but the water is pure where it is. So you should not have a taste or quantity issue at your connection.
Next question is from Bill Farrell. Will storage tanks be required now or later at the well site?
So water storage tanks, no. The system has water storage tanks on the hill behind Mescal Street at the high point. So that's where the municipal water system stores water for daily peak demands and emergency storage. If there's a fire, the water comes out of those tanks. There would be, if the site is not co-located with well 4, then in the well equipment room, there would be a small storage tank, a few hundred gallons in size, to store bleach, which is sodium hypochlorite, but it's bleach, which is the form of chlorine that gets injected into the drinking water system.
The next question is from Sandra Weaver. Since we assume only one test well will be drilled because of cost, what are the exact engineering criteria for choosing the site?
Well, we listed out criteria earlier. Rick, do you want to opine on some of this?
Yeah, and so it's mostly hydrogeological criteria, which you outlined during the presentation, which was we wanted to be in the deepest part of the Santa Margarita Formation. And I think you showed some of the contours that showed that at Lincoln Cunningham, or did you show?
Yeah, so let me just flip back here to the.
Or if I could share a screen, I don't know if I'm allowed to.
Wait, is this the slide you wanted?
Well, there's topography that shows. I can't share a screen. Is there somewhere to allow me to share?
Yeah, I think if I stop sharing,
Yeah, I think, oh, now I can share. Okay.
there you go. Yeah, I just had to
Yeah.
stop.
So here's showing the top, these lines right here, the teal colored lines show the approximate elevation of the top of the Santa Margarita Formation. And you can see here on the red line shows the approximate location of the fault. And here we're showing on the south side of the fault, the top of the formation is at 50 feet. And here on the north side of the fault, it's 250 feet. And it dips down to the south. So as you go up the hill towards wells 3 and 4, it tapers out and gets substantially thinner, the Santa Margarita Formation. So we're trying to stay as far to the west as possible. So this well site, which is in Lincoln Cunningham Park, is in a very deep part of the formation. It should be a very productive and efficient well. As we start climbing up the hill, we start pinching out on the Santa Margarita Formation. Here's another potential site that we're looking at. And you can see it's already quite a bit shallower, possibly 50 feet shallower, maybe even 100 feet shallower. So those are the considerations that we're mostly looking at. And then, as you pointed out, we also want to be somewhere within the system to minimize costs for connecting transmission lines to the well. All these things add cost as you start moving the well away from where the end users are. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Next question is, how old is well number 4 on Juarez?
Well 4 was drilled in January of 2001, I believe. So it will be legally able to drink next month. It's 21 years old.
Thanks for that, Andy. The next question is the added supply needed for existing customers, or is this really to serve a new development approved by city? Why should current residents bear impacts for a future project located elsewhere?
Okay, so this well is the duplicate, or the second, so it's the backup water supply for the existing well. Now, if there's capacity, the city also has development, the Campus Town project. And for the Campus Town project, the city has contracted with Marina Coast Water District to provide recycled water to the golf course. And that will allow the city to provide the Seaside groundwater basin water supply that was irrigating the golf course to Campus Town, and other portions of the city. Whether that supply can come from the municipal water system well or a different well possibly located at the golf course or at some other site sort of depends on where the where the well is located and what production rate, how much, what the sustainable yield of that well is. If it's providing 600 gallons a minute, it's only going to supply water for Seaside Municipal Water System. But if it's producing 1,000 gallons a minute, then some of that capacity might be used for the development. I understand that's kind of a wishy-washy response, but that's where we are.
I think it's important to point out that the well is required by state law, that we need a secondary water source and that we don't really have a reliable secondary water source. So it would be serving the existing customers, and that's its primary purpose. And I think ultimately it will be its only purpose.
Thank you. Next question. Can you address whether or not construction impacts to nearby residents will be one of the factors in determining the preferred site location?
Rick, you want to take that one on, or do you want me to field it?
So construction impacts, we're trying to mitigate them as much as possible. And so we're believing that by selecting a site that is in an existing park, it should not affect existing residents significantly. It will be a short-term impact to existing residents. There's the drilling operation and the construction of the well that would affect the residents, but we think that the long-term benefits outweigh the short-term impacts to the residents.
Next question. Can the city use eminent domain to acquire a well site on land it does not now own, thus increasing options, for example, in a non-residential area?
That's a legal question that I don't think any one of us is able to answer.
I would say that condemning a property through eminent domain would be a last resort. We would put in a very long pipeline to a viable site before we condemned a site inside the city.
Next question. What type of noise can be expected from a well once it's in operation?
That's a good question. So the well will have an electric motor. The electric motor will be, I looked this up the other day, on the order of 600 horsepower. It will, if it were in the open, you would be able to hear it from 50 feet or 100 feet away, but because it will be in a sound enclosure, actually it'll be in a building, you probably won't hear it at all.
Next question. Are those other sites near Fort Ord preferred to co-locating with well number 4?
Rick, you want to try that one?
I didn't quite understand that question. Are the other sites preferred to co-locating a well to number 4? I think so. Right now, I don't think that co-locating a well by well number 4 is really on the radar right now, simply because of the operational problems of operating both wells at the same time. We'd like to be at least 1,000 feet away from any operating well.
I have 3 more written comments, and then I'll open it up for those to speak live. The next question, the optimal well location from an engineering standpoint may not be the best location on other community considerations, such as compatibility with existing residences and protection of limited parkland. Would it not be wise to focus on a site that is a compromise and minimizes impact?
Yes, it would. And I think the design team is moving in that direction now. The previous studies had limited the analysis to in town. And now that the team understands that they can look on the former Fort Ord as well, the number of possibilities being considered is increased, and we're going to not make a final recommendation to City Council until all the sites have been looked at. But certainly from when you're looking at long-term operation of the well, you don't have a lot of heavy equipment that needs to access the site, but you do want to make sure that, the site you choose is accessible to a maintenance truck on the odd day when it has to show up.
Next question. What factors make the golf course less attractive?
Well, if we were to go back to the map and look at all the wells that are located up near the golf course, it's just the fact that there are so many other conflicting wells in that corner of the city. The further north you go, the thinner the water bearing strata gets. The shale is sloping uphill towards Lightfighter Drive. And so, you know, the further north you go in across the golf course, the less productive your wells become. So, and then at the intersection of Co Ave and Jim Moore Boulevard, which is kind of a sweet spot, that's where 4 ASR wells are located. Cal-Am has a production well. The golf course has a production well. You know, all the wells are there because it's deep, and you don't want to be next to the other production wells. So that kind of pushes us away from that corner. That doesn't mean we can't go a little bit further north or a little bit further east. It's just, you know, that's the further north or east you go, the longer pipe you need to connect the well site back to the corner of Jim Moore Boulevard and San Pablo, which is where the edge of the district is.
Right, and the other factor that you had mentioned earlier is that we'd have added costs for installing transmission pipeline from the well to the users.
Next question. The school property suggested has a lot of vacant land not currently used by the school buildings and playground fields. Why isn't that property higher on the list above the already established and dedicated parks, Lincoln Cunningham and Havana Solis, that are part of our neighborhood and culture?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and answer that one?
So the school property is actually not owned by the city, so the city would have to negotiate with the school to use the property, and I think that they probably believe that it's being used for its highest and best use. So there's the additional negotiation with the school district for acquiring their property, and then there's also the transmission pipeline since it's outside of the service area.
Next question. You stated structure would be 50 by 50. How high would the structure be?
Okay, so the well yard the fenced yard could be as small as 50 by 50. The structure itself is about the size of a one-car garage. All right, so it's 20 foot by 10 or 20 foot by 15. And it would be a little bit taller than your standard garage just because of the height of the wellhead and the motor sitting on it. So where a standard roof line would be maybe 12 foot off the ground, the well would be maybe 18 foot. The well roof line would be about 18 foot off the ground. So you know, slightly taller, slightly higher than a single story, but shorter than a two-story building.
Thank you. Next question. When will official work begin in the Lincoln Cunningham and Havana Solis parks? How long will test well be operating as an exploratory well?
So I don't think that either one of these parks has been definitive as the well site, but if it is selected ultimately, I think that it's approximately about a month to install and about a month to test out the well.
Thank you. Nisha will now be making a statement before we go over to the live questions and comments.
Yes, I just wanted to relay to the public that, you know, we're doing the research on the ideal location for a test well now. We'll have a report to present to the council, and ultimately they'll make a decision.
Thank you. Members of the public interested in making a comment or asking a question, please use the raise your hand feature or dial *9 if you're calling from a phone. 1 minute will be allotted for your question and or comment. You can also still submit your comments through the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Sandra Weaver, you now have the floor to make your comment.
Thank you for the presentation. I think it was very informative. I don't know what happened. I went away. Everything went away.
Ms. Weaver, did you have any other comments or was?
No.
Thank you. Donna, you now have the floor to make your comments.
Hi, this is Donna.
Go ahead with your question or comment.
Thank you. I have walked by the wells on the corner of Co Avenue and General Jim Moore, and also the well on Juarez. And both of those wells are very loud, in my opinion. They beep, they whirl, they make noises as the engines click on and click off. So it's hard for me to imagine that this well is not going to make a lot of noise. I just wanted to make that comment in, just in response kind of to what you said about the noise level. I'm also concerned about the lights. I know a lot of these well sites are lit 24/7. And if they were located in a neighborhood, I'm worried about the impact of the high level bright lights that would be on all of the time. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Susan Helinski, you now have the floor to make your comments. Susan, you can now unmute to make your comment or ask your question. There you go. Susan, you can now make your comment.
If she's having a problem with her microphone, maybe she can type in the question.
Yes, Susan, if you can type in the question in the Q&A. I'll come back to you to see if your mic is working. Laura Beret, you now have the floor to make your comment.
Yes, I'm a resident on Juarez Street. During the current well has consistent pump overs, which result in enormous amount of water that's being diverted into our streets, causing damages to homeowners, as well as witnessing of thousands of gallons of water that is consistently leaking down the road. I want to find out if the design of your pump will address that issue and that current location, as well as any future designs that's taken into consideration.
Thank you for your comments. Any questions that can be responded to at this time will be responded to after the questions are completed, but they are taking note. If any other members of the public have comments or questions, please use the raise your hand feature or dial *9 if you're calling from a phone. You can also still submit your questions to the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Bill, you now have the floor to make your comment.
Good webinar. I learned a lot. Thank you very much. I'm wondering if a transcript of the presentation and the questions, electronic or in some form, can be made available to people, neighbors, or people that attended. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Susan Helinski, if you want to try again to make your comment, you now have the floor. Laura, you now have the floor to make your comment.
I believe I've already made my comment.
Thank you. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, panel, that seems to be all the hands raised from the attendees. There is one more question in the Q&A. Will the test well construction and drilling go through a CEQA process?
Yes, it will. It will probably be a CEQA initial study. It's not, depending on the location. If it's located on the former Fort Ord, adjacent to the BLM, it may require something more involved than an initial study, but an initial study is for a municipal well, not because the drilling of the well triggers the study, but the construction impacts would trigger the study, and then be a way of documenting the required mitigations for sound, for traffic, etc. Let me go ahead and try and address some of the earlier questions or comments. Mr. Farrell's question about would a transcript be available? This webinar is being recorded. The recording will be on the city website. And then we are taking the questions asked and adding them to the questions. There's an FAQ list that just got posted today. We'll add the questions and answers from tonight's session as a written document and post that on the web. Donna asked about, or made a mention about the wells on Co. So the 4 wells up at the corner of Co and General Jim Moore Boulevard, the 2 on the southeast side and the 2 at Co Middle School on the northwest side, those are aquifer storage and recovery wells. I believe those well motors are not in sound enclosures. So yes, they are allowed. I believe that they don't have sound enclosures because they're not immediately adjacent to homes. All the wells which are in town are in enclosures. As far as lights, it's for the same reason. Those yards are not next to residential areas, and so they have the lights on 24/7, mainly as site security, not because it's a well, but because they don't want anybody to hop the fence and vandalize anything. Wells within the city would have lights on a motion detector. They would not be illuminated 24/7. And I don't know what's going on at well 4 is with pump overs. Rick, do you know? Does that well have a deep well control valve?
So this is the first I've ever heard this.
Yeah.
I don't know what the exact what's exactly happening there. It sounds like there's water spilling into the road, and someone talked about damage to the road. I'm not sure what's going on there. I've never heard this anyone talk about water from well number 4 before.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll check with operations staff, find out what's going on. Post a response. Obviously, if this, some wells, and I don't know if this particular well has it, some wells have what's called a deep well control valve, so that when the pumps first turns on, the water is discharged to the storm drain, and it's slowly, the valve slowly opens up to connect the well to, convert it from discharging to the storm drains, discharging to the distribution system, and that prevents a pressure surge in the distribution system. And similarly, when the well shuts down, the valve diverts the flow to waste first, and then the pump turns off. But those are normally piped to either a percolation basin or the storm drain system. It wouldn't be discharging to the street. So we'll have to have operations look at that.
So it sounds like it says city workers were releasing water into the street on Juarez. It sounds like this might have been something to do with the refurbishing of the well a few months ago. I know that they were working on the well, and it might have been just a short-term problem while they were refurbishing the well. I'm not sure, but the city staff would have to be asked if they know anything about this.
There are just a few more questions in the Q&A, and then I'll turn it over to Nisha for closing. One is, negotiating with MPUSD and laying one block of pipe doesn't seem too onerous compared to the loss of the park.
No, it does not, and that's why the site is on the list. So we need to give us time to talk to the hydrogeologist and talk to if that site's viable from the hydrogeologist standpoint, then we have to talk to the school district. If the school district is willing to give up a corner of their property for a well easement, then it can go on the list.
Next statement or comment that's made, city workers were releasing water into street on Juarez.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that the well number 4 failed several months ago, and it needed to be refurbished. And it sounds like it's possible during that refurbishing work that something was released to the street. But again, the city staff is going to have to be interviewed to find out what went on during that time.
Next comment, we call to complain and ask why not warned. Refurbishing well means what?
So the well failed, the motor failed, and I don't know all of the details on it since I'm not with city staff and I wasn't part of the fixing of the well. But it just means that the well needed to be fixed so that it would operate again.
The other two comments are also in regards to the Juarez Street flooding and the river of wasted water flooding into the street. So there'll need to be some follow-up from engineering and public works staff regarding those comments. Nisha, I'm turning it back over to you for closing.
Okay. Well, Andy, if you can bring it back to the last slide where we have the email address where people can still submit some questions.
Let me see here.
At
And
the end.
yep, trying to get the, there you go.
So a lot of great questions were answered, and as Andy relayed, we'll be posting some more answers to questions in our frequently asked questions section on the water systems section of our website. But if you still have some additional questions that you have and you didn't ask tonight, you can submit them to this email address shown on the screen at pwinfo@ci.seaside.ca.us, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. And then I just thank you all for joining. And again, you can submit additional questions.